"I've been aching down there," the black bride confessed to the giant mountain man, her words cutting through the bitter Colorado wind as storm clouds gathered above them both. The widow stands defiant against whispered accusations: gold digger, opportunist, worse. The mining town believes her fate sealed, destined to lose everything when her deceased husband's family contests his will. But the silent giant who listens without judgment carries secrets deeper than the mountain passes he calls home. Their unlikely alliance threatens to expose a hidden network that could save lives or destroy them both. The widow's inheritance isn't just land and money. It's a dangerous legacy that powerful men will kill to keep buried. In a territory where a black woman's word means nothing and a mountain hermit's loyalty changes everything. Can two outcasts survive the truth about what they've really inherited? Before we continue, comment where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will publish a story there. The morning sun cast long shadows across Copper Ridge as Henrietta Jones stood beside the fresh grave. Her black dress rippled in the mountain wind. The townspeople whispered behind gloved hands. 6 months. That's all the marriage had lasted. Banker Morrison adjusted his spectacles and shook his head. His wife clutched his arm tighter. The preacher hurried through his final words. Nobody wanted to linger at a scandalous burial. Hetty kept her chin raised. Let them whisper. Let them assume the worst about the educated black woman who'd married elderly William Jones. She'd heard it all before. The crowd began to disperse. Jasper Collins approached with a practiced smile. William's nephew had arrived from Denver just in time for the funeral. How convenient. "My deepest condolences, Mrs. Jones." His voice dripped false sympathy. "Uncle William spoke of you often in his letters." Hetty nodded curtly. She'd met Jasper once before. William had warned her about his nephew's gambling debts and land schemes. "I trust we'll speak soon about the estate matters," Jasper continued. "Family should handle these delicate situations." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Hetty watched him walk away, already calculating his next move. Martha Cole lingered near the cemetery gate. The inn owner offered a genuine smile. She'd been kind to Hetty from the beginning, one of the few who'd treated her with basic human decency. "You're welcome at the inn any time." "Dear," Martha said quietly, "don't let them break you." Hetty appreciated the gesture. In a town that viewed her with suspicion, Martha's friendship meant everything. 3 days later, the will reading commenced in Lawyer Bradshaw's cramped office. Jasper sat forward in his chair, confident and eager. Morrison attended as a witness. Sheriff Dooling stood in the corner, arms crossed. Bradshaw cleared his throat. "To my beloved wife, Henrietta Jones, I leave my entire estate." The room erupted in murmurs. However, she must remain on the property for 1 full year and prove her worthiness to the community. Jasper's face turned crimson. This is preposterous. That marriage was a sham. "The marriage was legal and witnessed," Bradshaw replied firmly. "Mr. Jones was of sound mind when he drafted this will." Hetty absorbed the shock. William had never mentioned any conditions. The year-long requirement felt like a test she hadn't studied for. "I'll be contesting this immediately," Jasper declared, storming from the office. Sheriff Dooling approached Hetty afterward. "You'll have trouble ahead, Mrs. Jones. Jasper has connections in Denver, influential friends." The warning was clear: fight alone or face destruction. That evening, Hetty rode out to the property's far edges. Her horse stumbled on loose rocks, sending sharp pain through her injured hip. The old riding accident still plagued her, especially when stress mounted. She dismounted carefully, favoring her left side. The pain had started 3 years ago, during her escape from an abusive employer in Kansas. She'd stolen his horse and ridden hard for 2 days. The fall had damaged something deep inside. Some days the ache was manageable, other days it consumed her thoughts. Today was one of the bad days. Smoke rose from a distant cabin, Levi Shepherd's place. The giant mountain man kept to himself, supplying lumber to the town. People respected his work but kept their distance. He was different, quiet, possibly dangerous in their eyes. Hetty had spoken to him only briefly at William's funeral. He'd offered simple condolences without the fake pity others displayed. Something about his manner had impressed her. Honest. Direct. Now she needed honesty more than anything. The ride to his cabin took an hour. Her hip throbbed with each step. Levi emerged from his workshop, wood shavings clinging to his massive frame. He stood nearly 7 feet tall, with gentle eyes that seemed to see too much. Mrs. Jones. He wiped his hands on a leather apron. Didn't expect visitors today. I need someone to listen, she said, dismounting with visible difficulty. Someone who won't judge. He gestured toward his porch. 2 simple chairs faced the mountain vista. They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes. The town thinks I'm a gold digger, Hetty finally spoke. They think I seduced William for his money. Levi listened without interruption. I've been aching down there. She touched her hip carefully. Old injury from a riding accident. Makes me look weak when I need to appear strong. Jasper will use anything against me. The confession felt dangerous. Admitting physical vulnerability in her position was risky. But Levi's presence encouraged honesty. William was kind to me, she continued. He offered protection when I had nowhere else to turn. Our marriage was real, even if it wasn't romantic. Levi nodded slowly. People see what they want to see. Truth doesn't matter much to gossips. His voice rumbled like distant thunder. Deeper than she'd expected, but surprisingly gentle. That hip needs proper tending, he said. Know some remedies that might help. The practical response surprised her. No judgment about propriety or appearances. Just simple problem solving. Why are you helping me? She asked. William was a good man. He wouldn't have chosen wrong. Levi stood slowly. Besides, this town could use more truth and less gossip. As Hetty rode home, something had shifted. For the first time since William's death, she didn't feel completely alone. The giant mountain man had listened without agenda or judgment. In a world of false smiles and hidden knives, that meant everything. The year ahead would test her in ways she couldn't imagine. But maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't have to face it entirely alone. 2 weeks after the will reading, Levi arrived at Hetty's door with a leather satchel. Inside were dried herbs and a clay jar filled with dark paste. For the hip, he said simply, willow bark and pine resin. Ute remedy. Hetty accepted the gift gratefully. The pain had worsened since Jasper began his legal campaign. Stress always made everything hurt more. There's something else, Levi continued. William asked me to show you the property boundaries. All of them. They rode out the next morning. Hetty's improved saddle, adjusted by Levi's careful hands, made the journey bearable. He led her through dense pine forests to areas she'd never explored. The old barn sat in a hidden valley, nearly invisible from the main trails. Weathered wood and a sagging roof made it appear abandoned. Levi dismounted and approached the heavy doors. William spent considerable time here, he said, producing an iron key. Inside, dust motes danced in shafts of sunlight. Hay bales lined the walls. Farm equipment sat covered in canvas. Nothing seemed unusual until Levi pressed against a wooden panel near the back wall. The panel swung inward, revealing a hidden room. Hetty gasped. The space contained a desk, filing cabinets, and detailed maps covering 3 territories. Neat handwriting filled ledger after ledger. Names, dates, routes, and dollar amounts filled every page. Underground Railroad, Levi explained quietly. Still running in 1887. The scope overwhelmed her. William had been funding education for freed slaves across Colorado, New Mexico, and Wyoming territories. 12 families currently received support. 3 safe houses remained active. 8 children attended hidden schools. You knew about this, Hetty said. It wasn't a question. I was his partner. Mountain routes are safest for transport. Levi pulled out a detailed trail map marked in red ink. Been helping families reach safety for 5 years. Hetty studied the financial records. William had been methodical. Every expense tracked, every donation recorded. The operation had cost him nearly $30,000 over 5 years. Then she found the sealed envelope marked with her name. Inside, William's final letter explained everything. He'd chosen her not just for companionship, but for her intelligence and education. He'd observed her natural leadership abilities during their brief courtship. The year-long inheritance condition wasn't about proving worthiness to the town. It was about giving her time to understand and continue his work. The final paragraph took her breath away. William had hidden $50,000 in assets specifically for continuing the operation. The money was hers to use as she saw fit. He planned this from the beginning, she whispered. Levi nodded. Said you had the mind for organization and the heart for justice. He was right about both. Over the following days, Hetty immersed herself in William's records. Her educated background served her well. She'd learned to read and write by secretly attending classes meant for white children in Kansas. Her employer's daughter had been her unwitting teacher, never knowing the house servant absorbed every lesson. Those stolen hours of education now proved invaluable. Hetty understood complex financial arrangements, geographical logistics, and operational security. She began reorganizing William's scattered notes into efficient systems. Levi watched her work with growing admiration. She identified supply routes he'd never considered. She streamlined communication between safe houses. She created backup plans for emergency situations. You're a natural strategist, he observed, after she'd solved a complex transportation problem. I learned to think 3 steps ahead when survival depended on it, she replied, not looking up from her calculations. Within a week, Hetty had transformed the chaotic operation into a precision instrument. She scheduled supply runs, coordinated housing arrangements, and managed finances with remarkable skill. Martha Cole proved to be another secret ally. The inn owner had been providing safe harbor for traveling families without William's knowledge. She'd recognized the signs and helped quietly. Been wondering when someone would approach me officially, Martha admitted during a clandestine meeting. My inn has hidden more people than you'd imagine. The 3 of them formed an efficient team. Martha provided intelligence from town gossip. Levi handled transportation and security. Hetty managed strategy and resources. But challenges mounted daily. Federal marshals had been asking questions in nearby towns. Reports of suspicious activities were increasing. Someone was paying attention to their movements. Jasper hired private investigators from Denver. They asked probing questions about Hetty's background and William's final months. The legal pressure intensified with each passing day. Sheriff Dooling found himself caught between duty and conscience. He respected law and order, but he'd begun to understand the good work being done. His predecessor had been corrupt, taking bribes to look the other way on far worse activities. Federal attention is growing, he warned Hetty privately. Can't protect you much longer if they decide to investigate. The warning proved prophetic. 3 days later, a family of 4 arrived at the hidden barn badly injured and terrified. Bounty hunters had attacked their previous safe house. 2 other families had scattered in panic. We got nowhere else to go, the father pleaded, cradling his wounded son. They said you could help. Hetty looked at Levi. The decision would define everything that followed. Continue William's dangerous work or abandon it for personal safety. We help them, she said without hesitation. Levi smiled for the first time since she'd known him. William chose well. The operation had found its new leader. Hetty Jones was no longer just inheriting property. She was inheriting a mission that would test every skill she possessed and every principle she held dear. The real work was just beginning. The injured family needed immediate transport to the northern safe house. The father's arm hung useless at his side. His wife clutched their infant daughter. Their 10-year-old son had taken a bullet graze across his shoulder. Hetty assessed the situation with cold efficiency. The bounty hunters would return with reinforcements. They had maybe 6 hours before the trail grew too dangerous. Mountain route through Devil's Pass, Levi said, studying his maps. Rough terrain, but they won't follow us there. The journey would take 12 hours on horseback. Hetty knew her hip couldn't handle that kind of punishment. But these people needed help now. We leave in 1 hour, she decided. Levi gathered supplies while Hetty prepared the wagon. They'd transport the family in William's old freight cart, disguised as a routine lumber delivery. If questioned, Levi was simply moving timber to his northern cutting sites. The father, Samuel, could barely stay upright. His wife, Ruth, fought back tears while tending their wounded son. The baby remained unnaturally quiet, sensing the danger around them. "How far to safety?" Ruth whispered. 12 hours, Hetty replied honestly. "But you'll make it." They left Copper Ridge before dawn. Levi drove the wagon while Hetty rode alongside on horseback. The family huddled beneath canvas tarps between stacks of genuine lumber. The first 3 hours passed without incident. They climbed steadily into pine forests where few travelers ventured. The air grew thin and cold. Snow patches appeared despite the late spring season. Then Hetty's hip began to seize. The old injury flared without warning. Sharp pain shot down her left leg. Her grip on the reins weakened. She fought to stay upright in the saddle. Levi noticed immediately. He'd learned to read her subtle signs of distress. "Need to rest," he called softly. "No time," she replied through gritted teeth. "They're depending on us." The pain worsened with each mile. By midday, Hetty could barely control her horse. Sweat beaded on her forehead despite the mountain cold. Her vision blurred from the constant agony. Devil's Pass loomed ahead. The narrow trail wound between towering cliffs. One wrong step meant death for everyone in their party. Levi had learned these mountains as a child. Orphaned at age 8, he'd been found half dead by a Ute hunting party. They'd raised him as their own, teaching him to read the land like a book. The Ute had shown him every hidden trail, every water source, every shelter between Colorado and Wyoming. They'd taught him to move silently, track expertly, and survive in conditions that killed weaker men. More importantly, they'd taught him that all people deserve dignity, regardless of their background. The concept of racial superiority meant nothing to those who judged worth by character and actions. "This land belongs to everyone who respects it," his adoptive father had said. "Help those who need help. Protect those who cannot protect themselves." Now Levi applied those lessons. He guided the wagon through passages that seemed impossible for wheeled transport. His memory mapped every boulder, every fallen tree, every unstable section of trail. Halfway through the pass, Hetty collapsed. The pain overwhelmed her completely. She slipped from the saddle and crumpled to the rocky ground. For a moment, the mission seemed doomed. Levi secured the wagon and knelt beside her. "How bad?" "Can't go on," she gasped. "Get them to safety. Leave me here." "Not happening." Without another word, Levi lifted her onto the wagon. He rearranged the cargo to make room, settling her between lumber stacks where she could rest. "I can walk," Samuel offered weakly. "Save your strength," Levi replied. "Long way still to go." The giant mountain man took point, leading both horses while navigating the treacherous trail on foot. His strength seemed inexhaustible. His knowledge of the terrain proved flawless. They descended through hidden valleys where ancient trees blocked out the sky. They forded streams that appeared on no official maps. They followed game trails that only native peoples knew existed. Throughout the journey, Levi never showed frustration or fatigue. He simply did what needed doing. As evening approached, the northern safe house came into view. The cabin sat in a protected valley, invisible from main roads. Smoke rose from its chimney. Safety, at last. Martha's cousin, Elizabeth, ran the northern station. She emerged as they approached, already preparing medical supplies. The network's communication system had warned her to expect injured travelers. "Thank God you made it," Elizabeth said, helping Ruth from the wagon. "We heard about the bounty hunter attack. Been worried sick." The family was quickly moved inside. Samuel's arm needed proper setting. The boy's wound required cleaning and bandaging. Ruth and the baby needed rest and nourishment. Levi carried Hetty to a separate room where Elizabeth could examine her hip. The joint had swollen badly during the journey. Movement sent fresh waves of agony through her entire side. "This needs time to heal properly," Elizabeth pronounced. "You pushed too hard today." "Had to," Hetty replied weakly. "They were counting on us." Levi sat beside her bed through the night. He applied cold compresses to reduce the swelling. He prepared pain-relieving tea from herbs in his pack. He simply stayed present when words weren't enough. By morning, Hetty's pain had subsided enough for travel. The rescued family was stable and recovering. The mission had succeeded despite nearly impossible odds. As they prepared to return home, Ruth approached Hetty with tears in her eyes. "You risked everything for strangers," Ruth said quietly. "Don't know how to thank you." "Help someone else when you can," Hetty replied. "That's thanks enough." The ride back to Copper Ridge was gentler. Levi had proven his capabilities beyond any doubt. Hetty had discovered reserves of determination she hadn't known existed. Together, they'd saved lives and honored William's legacy. But greater challenges waited ahead. Word of the successful rescue spread through the underground network. 3 more families requested transport within days of their return. But Jasper Collins had also been busy during their absence. His Denver investigators had uncovered disturbing information. They'd tracked Hetty's movements, documented her meetings with Levi, and cataloged every suspicious activity around the property. The evidence painted a picture of illegal operations that could destroy everything. Jasper cornered Hetty outside the general store on a busy Saturday morning. His smile was predatory, confident. He'd clearly found something damaging. "Interesting company you keep, Mrs. Jones," he said loudly enough for nearby shoppers to hear. "Mountain hermits and midnight riders. Makes people wonder what you're really doing out there." "I'm managing my inherited property," Hetty replied evenly. "Nothing more. My investigators disagree. They've documented some fascinating activities. Federal marshals might find their reports quite illuminating." The threat hung between them like a loaded gun. Jasper had evidence of the Underground Railroad operations. One word to federal authorities would bring everything crashing down. "What do you want?" Hetty asked quietly. "Simple. Sign over the property to the rightful heir. Walk away quietly. Everyone stays safe." Hetty studied his face. Jasper's desperation seemed disproportionate to a simple inheritance dispute. Something deeper drove his obsession with William's land. "I need time to consider," she said. "1 week, then I file my federal complaint." That evening, Hetty met with Martha and Levi at the hidden barn. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her shoulders. Dozens of people depended on their network. One wrong decision could expose everyone. "He's bluffing," Martha insisted. "Federal marshals have bigger concerns than helping spoiled nephews steal inheritances." Levi disagreed. "Government's been cracking down on anything that looks suspicious. They won't distinguish between current operations and old Underground Railroad routes." "So what do we do?" Hetty asked. "We could shut down temporarily," Martha suggested. "Let things cool off. 3 families are waiting for transport," Hetty reminded them. "We can't abandon them now." The next morning brought worse news. Sheriff Dooling visited Hetty at dawn, his face grim with concern. "Federal marshals sent word they're coming to Copper Ridge," he said. "Official business, they called it, arriving within the week." "What kind of official business?" "Didn't specify, but timing seems connected to certain complaints filed in Denver." Jasper had followed through on his threat. Federal attention was now focused directly on their operations. The network had perhaps days before everything unraveled. That afternoon, panic began to spread. Word reached the safe houses that federal marshals were investigating. 2 families immediately fled their hiding places. Another requested emergency transport to Canada. The carefully constructed network started fracturing. 5 years of William's work threatened to collapse in a matter of days. Hetty felt the crushing weight of leadership. Every decision carried life-changing consequences. Every mistake could destroy innocent people. The responsibility seemed impossible to bear. Levi found her sitting alone in the hidden room that evening. She was staring at William's maps without really seeing them. "Having doubts?" he asked gently. I'm terrified, she admitted. These people trusted William. Now they're trusting me. What if I'm not strong enough? Levi sat beside her on the rough wooden bench. His presence was steady, reassuring. William saw something in you that others missed, he said. Intelligence, courage, determination. He wasn't wrong. But what if I fail? What if my decisions get people hurt? Then you'll learn from the mistakes and do better next time. That's how leadership works. His quiet confidence helped settle her nerves. Levi had a way of making impossible situations seem manageable. Why did you stay in Copper Ridge all these years? She asked. You could have gone anywhere. Been waiting for something worth staying for, he replied simply. The admission hung between them. Both understood the deeper meaning behind his words. After this is over, Hetty said carefully, assuming we survive, what then? Build something lasting. Something that honors what William started. Together? If you'll have me? Their relationship had grown naturally through shared danger and mutual respect. Neither had spoken directly about the future, but both felt the connection deepening. 2 days later, disaster struck. Banker Morrison organized a town meeting to discuss concerns about suspicious activities on the Jones property. Half the town attended, including several vocal critics of Hetty's inheritance. Morrison stood before the crowd with righteous indignation. Decent folk have observed strange comings and goings. Midnight riders, secret meetings, questionable associations. What are you suggesting? Asked Dr. Hammond, one of Hetty's few supporters. I'm suggesting that certain people are using our community for illegal purposes, activities that could bring federal scrutiny down on all of us. The crowd murmured agreement. Fear of government attention outweighed sympathy for Hetty's situation. The solution is simple, Morrison continued. Transfer the property to responsible local ownership. End whatever questionable activities are occurring. Jasper stood from the back of the room. I've already offered to assume responsibility for my uncle's estate. Mrs. Jones need only sign the papers. The pressure was building toward an inevitable conclusion. Public opinion was shifting against Hetty. Federal marshals were arriving soon. The network was falling apart from internal panic. But Martha Cole rose slowly from her seat near the front. Her voice cut through the murmurs with surprising authority. Before we make hasty decisions based on gossip and fear, she said firmly, perhaps we should learn the full truth about William Jones and his legacy. The room fell silent. Martha's timing suggested she knew something important, something that could change everything. Truth has a way of surprising people, she continued, her eyes finding Hetty in the crowd, especially when it involves corruption, cover-ups, and crimes some folks thought were safely buried. The setup for revelation was complete. Hidden truths were about to emerge. Martha Cole's declaration silenced the packed room. She stood with the confidence of someone holding powerful cards. Her usually gentle demeanor had transformed into something steely and determined. I've been researching William Jones's papers at Mrs. Jones's request, Martha announced. What I discovered might shock some of you, especially those with guilty consciences. Jasper's face went pale. Morrison shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Several prominent townspeople exchanged nervous glances. William wasn't just helping freed slaves find education and safety, Martha continued. He was documenting crimes, serious federal crimes that continued long after the war ended. She produced a leather portfolio from her bag. The room watched in tense silence as she opened it deliberately. Illegal slave trading, for instance. Bills of sale dated 1868, 1869, 1870, years after emancipation. Signed documents showing the purchase and transport of human beings across territorial lines. Gasps echoed through the crowd. The Civil War had ended over 20 years ago. Such activities were not just morally reprehensible, but federally prosecutable. William spent 5 years gathering evidence, Martha explained. Names, dates, financial records, transportation routes. Everything needed for successful prosecution. Hetty stared in amazement. She'd studied William's papers extensively, but hadn't understood their full significance. The Underground Railroad operation had been a cover for something much larger. These records document a criminal network spanning 3 territories, Martha continued, involving prominent businessmen, corrupt officials, and their hired enforcers. William was preparing to turn everything over to federal authorities when he died. Jasper stood abruptly. This is preposterous. My uncle was a confused old man making wild accusations. Your uncle was a federal informant, Martha replied calmly, working directly with marshals in Denver. They're coming to Copper Ridge not to investigate Mrs. Jones, but to collect William's evidence. The revelation hit like a thunderclap. Everything had been backwards. The federal marshals weren't responding to Jasper's complaints. They were completing William's investigation. Furthermore, Martha continued, these records show the Collins family was central to the criminal network. Your father, Jasper, organized transportation. Your uncle James handled finances. Your cousin Robert managed the breeding farms. Jasper's composure cracked completely. You can't prove any of this. Those papers could be forgeries. Federal marshals will determine authenticity, Martha replied. They have handwriting experts, financial analysts, and corroborating witnesses. Morrison tried to regain control of the meeting. Even if these allegations were true, they concern events from decades ago. What matters now is current illegal activities on the Jones property. What illegal activities? Martha challenged. Helping families find legitimate employment, funding education for children, supporting community development projects? Secret meetings, midnight riders, suspicious transport activities, Morrison stammered. All documented and reported to federal authorities, Martha explained. William's operation was completely legal. He had permits for interstate commerce, licenses for educational funding, and official approval for his humanitarian work. The crowd absorbed this information slowly. The Underground Railroad operation hadn't been illegal at all. William had obtained proper federal authorization years earlier. Hetty finally understood the full scope of William's planning. He'd created a legitimate organization that could operate openly while gathering evidence against actual criminals. Sheriff Dooling spoke from the back of the room. Mrs. Cole, are you saying the federal marshals are coming to arrest people? I'm saying they're coming to collect evidence that will lead to arrests, Martha replied. William's records contain enough proof to prosecute dozens of individuals across multiple territories. Jasper made a desperate final attempt. This is all speculation and hearsay. Mrs. Jones has obviously influenced Mrs. Cole to fabricate these stories. The records speak for themselves, Martha said, holding up a thick folder. Would you like me to read your father's correspondence about shipping routes and pricing structures? His letters are quite detailed. Jasper's face went ashen. He knew exactly what those letters contained. The room erupted in whispers and arguments. Some people demanded to see the evidence immediately. Others insisted the meeting should end until authorities arrived. A few quietly slipped toward the exits. Morrison attempted to restore order but had lost all authority. The revelation had completely shifted the power dynamic. Hetty was no longer the suspected criminal. She was the guardian of evidence that would bring justice. Dr. Hammond stood and addressed the crowd. It seems we owe Mrs. Jones an apology. We've been questioning her character while she was protecting us from scrutiny. Protecting criminals, more likely, Jasper snarled. Protecting the truth, Hetty said, speaking for the first time, which is exactly what William asked me to do. She rose slowly, feeling every eye in the room focused on her. The scared widow who'd sought help for her aching hip had transformed into something entirely different. I inherited more than property from William, she continued. I inherited responsibility for seeing justice done. The federal marshals will receive every document, every record, every piece of evidence William gathered. This is madness, Jasper protested. You people are believing fantasies and fabrications. Then you have nothing to worry about, Levi said from his position near the door. His deep voice carried clearly through the room. Innocent people welcome investigations. The giant mountain man had been watching everything with calm assessment. His presence reminded everyone that Hetty wasn't alone in this fight. The marshals arrive tomorrow, Sheriff Dooling announced. Until then, I suggest everyone remain calm and let federal authorities handle these serious allegations. The meeting dissolved into chaos as people rushed to discuss the revelations. Some approached Hetty with apologies and offers of support. Others hurried away to warn friends or destroy evidence. Jasper pushed through the crowd toward the exit, his face twisted with rage and desperation. His inheritance scheme had collapsed completely. Worse, his family's criminal legacy was about to be exposed publicly. Martha gathered her papers carefully. "The marshals will want to interview you first thing tomorrow," she told Hetty. "You're William's designated representative." "Are you certain about all this?" Hetty asked quietly. "William was thorough," Martha replied. "He documented everything carefully. Justice will finally be served." As the crowd dispersed, Levi moved to Hetty's side. His steady presence anchored her as the full implications became clear. Tomorrow would bring federal marshals, official investigations, and public vindication. The truth was finally emerging from decades of darkness. The federal marshals arrived at dawn with a wagon full of document cases and official papers. Marshal Thomas Crawford had traveled from Denver specifically to conclude William Jones's 5-year investigation. His partner, Marshal Roberts, carried arrest warrants for 7 individuals. Hetty met them at the courthouse with Martha and Levi beside her. She carried William's complete files in 2 leather satchels. Her hands were steady now. The fear and uncertainty had transformed into quiet determination. "Mrs. Jones, I presume," Marshal Crawford said, tipping his hat, "we've been expecting this meeting for quite some time." "William's evidence is complete and organized," Hetty replied, placing the satchels on the courthouse table. "Everything is documented as he promised." Crawford opened the first satchel and whistled softly. The organization was impressive. Financial records, correspondence, witness statements, and transportation logs were arranged chronologically and cross-referenced by defendant. "Your husband was remarkably thorough," Crawford observed. "This investigation will proceed quickly with evidence this complete." The first arrest came within an hour. Jasper Collins was taken into custody at the hotel where he'd been planning his hasty departure. The warrant charged him with conspiracy, fraud, and accessory to human trafficking. Morrison followed shortly after. His banking records showed financial transactions supporting the illegal operations. He'd laundered money for the criminal network for over a decade. By noon, 5 more arrests had been made. The criminal network that had operated with impunity for 20 years was finally being dismantled. Sheriff Dooling assisted the marshals professionally, relieved to finally clean up corruption his predecessor had ignored. The new evidence exonerated him of any wrongdoing while exposing the true criminals. The town watched in stunned silence as prominent citizens were led away in chains. People who'd questioned Hetty's character now realized she'd been protecting them from association with actual criminals. Dr. Hammond approached Hetty outside the courthouse that afternoon. His face showed genuine remorse. "Mrs. Jones, I owe you a profound apology. We all do. You've been serving justice while we were spreading gossip." "William deserves the credit," Hetty replied graciously. "I just honored his final wishes. Still, your courage made this possible. Copper Ridge is in your debt." Similar apologies came throughout the day. People who'd whispered cruel assumptions now offered genuine respect and gratitude. The transformation was remarkable. 2 weeks later, the legal proceedings concluded. Jasper and his associates were sentenced to federal prison terms ranging from 5 to 15 years. Their ill-gotten assets were seized and redistributed to their victims' families. Hetty's inheritance was legally secured beyond any challenge. The year-long worthiness requirement was officially waived due to her exemplary service to the community. More importantly, the Underground Railroad operation received federal recognition as a legitimate historical preservation society. The safe houses would become official educational centers. The transportation network would continue openly as a community service organization. Martha Cole revealed her final secret at the celebration dinner. She produced a certificate showing her ordination as a minister, authorized to perform marriages in Colorado territory. "Been keeping that quiet for practical reasons," she explained. "Frontier towns aren't always ready for women preachers, but times are changing." Levi and Hetty exchanged glances across the table. They'd discussed marriage privately but hadn't made formal plans. "If you're both ready," Martha continued with a knowing smile. I'd be honored to officiate. The wedding took place 1 month later in the same church where Hetty had endured whispered accusations. Now the pews were filled with genuine friends and supporters. The entire community gathered to celebrate. Hetty wore a simple white dress that Martha had helped her choose. No longer the mysterious widow in mourning black, she radiated confidence and joy. Her hip had healed completely with proper treatment and reduced stress. Levi stood beside her in his finest clothes, still towering over everyone but no longer isolated. The gentle giant had found his place in the community through partnership with an extraordinary woman. Their vows were simple and heartfelt. They promised to face life's challenges together, to support each other's dreams, and to continue the work that had brought them together. "You may kiss your bride," Martha announced with obvious satisfaction. The kiss was gentle, respectful, and full of promise. Two people who'd been dismissed and underestimated had found strength in each other. 6 months later, the William Jones School for All Children held its grand opening. The former safe houses had been converted into classrooms and community centers. Children of every background attended together, learning reading, writing, mathematics, and practical skills. Hetty served as the school's director, applying her organizational abilities to education. Her natural leadership had found its perfect expression in nurturing young minds. Levi managed the physical facilities and taught wilderness survival skills. His knowledge of the land and its resources proved invaluable for preparing students for frontier life. The opening ceremony drew visitors from across 3 territories. Former students of William's secret schools returned as successful adults to thank their benefactors. Families who'd been helped by the Underground Railroad brought their children to see the legacy continue. Martha Cole delivered the dedication speech, her voice carrying clearly across the gathered crowd. William Jones believed that education and opportunity should be available to everyone regardless of their background, she declared. Today we see his vision fulfilled openly and proudly. Hetty and Levi stood together on the school's front steps, watching children play in the yard where supplies had once been secretly stored. The transformation was complete and beautiful. That evening, they rode together across their land as equal partners. The woman who'd once ached with physical pain and emotional isolation now moved freely beside the man who'd learned to trust and love again. The sunset painted the mountains in brilliant colors. Their horses moved in easy rhythm. 2 outcasts had found belonging, purpose, and each other. Behind them, lights began appearing in Copper Ridge windows. The community they'd helped heal was settling into another peaceful evening. Justice had been served, truth had been revealed, and love had triumphed. The future stretched ahead full of promise and possibility. Together, they would continue building something lasting and meaningful from the foundation William had laid. Their journey from suspicion to respect, from isolation to community, from individual struggle to shared strength, was complete. The aching was gone, replaced by healing that extended far beyond themselves.